Today we are starting a project that will take me over the course of months and you will see the fruit of now. And that is I, along with a bunch of other booktubers, am reading, we're doing a retrospective of Goodreads Choice Award winners. So a bunch of different people have been doing this project. I will have a playlist listed below with the different videos that people have been doing. This was Izzy from Happy for Now's brainchild, and Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany helped her organize it. But there are a ton of booktubers doing this, so please check out that playlist. It's some of my favorite people, mostly suffering, I think. But each of us took a different category from the Goodreads Choice Awards and read the winners for the last 10 years. So we read 2013 through 2022 Goodreads Choice Award winners, and my category was mystery thriller. So I'm gonna throw you to the past to see how this journey went. And we'll meet back up here to discuss the results at the end. Strap in. Hi, so we're gonna find out what all I'm gonna read. Let me get my little screen recorder doodad up and going here, and we'll get into it. So I'm starting in 2013, and then we'll go up through 2022. As of this filming, I don't know what the 2022 winner is, so we won't be reacting to that, but let's react to all of the past ones. My hope is that I've read a good number of these, and that if I haven't read them, that I'm not going to be too mad about what I have to read. So, okay, just hit record. So, 2013. Mystery thriller winner is Dan Brown's Inferno, which is one that I have, and I have been meaning to read for a long time. So I'm actually quite happy with that because I think that will be yummy, yummy candy. I think that this is another one in his whoever Tom Hanks plays in the movies series, and I'm down for a page-turnery improbable conspiracy. So that one, very excited for. 2014, Mr. Mercedes by Stephen King. I guess I didn't necessarily know that that was a mystery thriller. Is it? It's the first in a series, so that's good at least. I don't need to go back and read anything. Pre-dawn hours. I mean, Stephen King, I pretty much always have a decent time in his books. Just sometimes, well, pretty much always. I think they go off the rails at the end, but okay. I would not have necessarily chosen to read that, but I'm not mad about it. 2015... No! No! The Girl on the Train. I do not want to read this. It's just not my kind of book. I DNF'd it when it first came out because it was so popular. So I'm not going to make you promises that I'm going to finish that, but I'll try. That one is a real bummer, guys. Really bummed about that particular book. Okay, going on into 2016. I'm also bummed that I've not fully read any of these yet. Okay, we've got another Stephen King. And this is, ooh, okay. End of Watch. Is it number 2? It's a number 3. So you're telling me I'm gonna have to read this whole GD series? Why did I agree to do this? This is such a mistake. Okay, I guess I'm reading a full series from Stephen King just for fun. Why do I do this to myself? Okay, 2017, Into the Water by Paula Hawkins. Guys, I need to catch a break here. I've not read any of these yet, and only one of them have I been genuinely interested in reading. Stephen King will be fine, but 2 Paula Hawkins, this is a conspiracy. This is a conspiracy for my displeasure. Okay, 2018, what is it now? Stephen King, The Outsider. Good God, I was not planning to have to read this much Stephen King. This is one that I was at least interested in. So, should I just rename this my Stephen King vlog? Because that's apparently all I'm going to read. And I apparently have not read any of the winners. Let's see, 2019. Silent Patient. Yes, finally. Okay. One that I've read. Thank God. So, I've read that one. I liked it much more than The Maidens, which I hated. Okay, 2020. I can't remember what won that year. The Guest List, which I've also read and was meh on. It was okay. It wasn't my favorite. So-so. 2021 is The Last Thing He Told Me, which I know nothing about. Did I know that this won last year? Which a mother and stepdaughter tried to unwind a lethally knotted secret. When Owen Michaels disappears... Okay, protect her. Okay. Well, at least it's not another Stephen King, I guess. So, also just address the irony that the one Stephen King that I do have on my TBR is not one of the winners. Okay. I guess I knew that I know Stephen King wins usually the categories he's in, but I guess I tend to think of him as being dominating in horror more than mystery thriller. But I guess our little trip down memory lane here has proven that he's been dominating other categories beyond horror on Goodreads for decades at this point. So, come with me on my Stephen King vlog, basically, and we have to wait and find out what wins 2022. I am going to be voting. I'm filming this on the day of the last round opening up, so I'm doing a live vote tonight, and then I think in about a week and a half or so we'll know what the winner is. So I guess I'll check back in with you guys once I have all of these books. I only own one of them already, which was Inferno. And I would say of the ones on this list, we're gonna sort them. Inferno I'm excited to read. I'm okay reading The Outsider and the first book, Mr. Mercedes. Those are okay. Like, those three are definitely the ones I'm most excited about. I'm neutral on The Last Thing He Told Me. I don't really want to read a whole series from Stephen King, so I don't know about that. And then I have to read 2 Paula Hawkins, of which I'm not interested in either. So, okay. This is feeling increasingly ill-advised, but I'll check back in once I have some of these books. I'm excited to see that the Maid won mystery thriller. I'm excited because that's what I voted for, but also for reasons I can't tell you guys yet. So I read and really enjoyed that one at the end of last year, actually. So I'm glad to see that won. I thought The Maid had a pretty good chance. I didn't feel like this was a year where there was like a clear winner in mystery thriller. So, and then, people are saying you can click on each category and see what the vote spread was. That's right. Okay, so how much? Okay, so it looks like it was pretty close actually between The Maid and Lucy Foley. And I have to say, selfishly, I'm very, very glad The Maid won over Lucy Foley, because I may or may not be working on something where I would have had to read that book. And I really did not want to have to read it. So I'm very glad that this one prevailed. Okay, so we have our winner, The Maid, which thank God, because I like The Maid, for one thing. It was what I voted for. For another thing, I already have several books I need to read, so I wasn't necessarily looking to add to that pile. And finally, we've had mixed success with Lucy Foley. So very happy The Maid pulled through. With that said, that segues nicely with my antipathy towards Lucy Foley. If I was gonna rank the 3 I've already read, I would put The Maid at the top. Not by a huge margin, but yeah, I would say I liked it better than The Silent Patient, which I would put next by Alex Michaelides, and then the Lucy Foley at the bottom. So that's where we're at going into this. I have procured all of the books, and I have 8 of them to read, because I have the first and last book in a Stephen King series that I need to read, so I need to read the middle one, which brings our total to 4 Stephen Kings I have to read, 2 Paula Hawkins, and let's make some predictions. So I think I'm gonna like Inferno by Dan Brown. I think it's gonna be dumb fun, which I am here for, and the fact that The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave won last year, even though I hadn't heard a lot about it. Oh, well, it's a Reese's Book Club pick. That's probably why it won. Okay, I'm gonna put this in the unsure bucket. The only one I'm pretty confident I'm gonna like is Inferno, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm gonna put this in the unsure bucket, and I'm also going to put the series by Stephen King in the unsure bucket, because I just don't really know anything about this. Gosh, I'm very much failing at holding all of these books. Okay, I'm gonna put this series in the unsure bucket along with The Last Thing He Told Me, because I just don't know how I feel about Stephen King as a thriller writer. I know him much more as horror or speculative of some kind. So I don't know anything about this series. The first one is Mr. Mercedes, so I don't know how I'm gonna do with these. I am glad that they're not long Stephen Kings. Like, they all look like they're in the sort of 350 to 400 range, so that makes me feel slightly better about that. And then I'm gonna guess I also will like The Outsider by Stephen King, because this intrigued me when it came out. I just never got around to it. I've heard the ending's not great. That's pretty typical for Stephen King, so I can make my peace with that. But I think overall I'll probably like this. It is much more of like horror or speculative with thriller from what I understand. And then I've already DNF'd this once, so we're gonna try again. And then I don't have high hopes for this. So I think I'm not gonna like either of these, but we'll find out when I give them a go. So that's where we're starting this project. I'll check back in once I've finished some books. Okay. I finished the first book that I was reading freshly for this project because I want to start with the ones that I don't think I'm going to like as much. So I've DNF'd this once and I got about 100 pages in. Yes, 101 pages, and I DNF'd it again. But I will say, I am really glad that I tried to read this again. So if I'm recalling correctly, the first time I tried to read this was when it was first out, and I tried it as audio, and I did not enjoy it. And I don't think I had read enough contemporary thriller in that moment to have good vocabulary about what it was I wasn't enjoying about it. But I'm really glad that I tried to read this again, because I think that this has given me some new language to describe why contemporary thrillers or suspense have been a struggle for me up until the last few years, because I think that this and Gone Girl represent a trend in thriller and suspense that I just am not a huge fan of. It's the unreliable narrator, it's the multi-timeline alternating POV, it's the version of unreliable narrator, which is one of our narrators is an alcoholic and has blackouts, and that's like one of my least favorite tropes in this. And it's just the overall dour tone. I don't like that. It's just not for me. It's not that I actually like the writing in this fine. And I think that the character work is doing a good job of what it's trying to do, which is portraying a bunch of very unlikable people. And that's fine. I just need more humanity towards the characters than I feel like this genre. Actually, I wasn't expecting to say that, but that's exactly it. I feel like this flavor of domestic suspense and thriller treats people like they are they are intrinsically the worst characteristics of themselves. And I just don't like that. I don't think that it's humanizing. I think it's treating people like the sum of them is their worst characteristics. And I don't think that it's not even that it's realistic. It's just not like a version of the world that I enjoy reading. I'm much more compelled by thrillers and mysteries where you have a lot of complicated people who have good and bad things about them. I really enjoy it when the killer ends up being somebody who was super likable or super engaging. Like, I enjoy feeling like the complicity I feel of rooting for this person who I know is not doing good things. Like, that's more what I enjoy in mystery thriller. And this just was a really clarifying DNF for me. I'm very glad that this project made me do this, because I think I was able to learn and articulate things about myself as a reader that I would not have had I not revisited a book I tried to read roughly 10 years ago. So, bottom line for me, I don't like this kind of book, and that's why I DNF'd it. I, however, remain more hopeful now about Into the Water, which is the other Paula Hawkins book we're gonna read for this project, because I do think the writing itself is good, and maybe with different tropes, possibly I could like that better. Like, I'm hopeful at this point that I could like another book by this author in a way that I was not before DNFing this. So for me, this represents a trend and an era of mystery thriller that I don't like. And it was incredibly popular, so it makes complete sense that this won this year. I actually think I might like a film of this better, so this kind of makes me more interested to watch the film. For instance, I thought the film of Gone Girl for me was much more successful than the book, just because in a movie, it doesn't feel as just like dour. There's something about like seeing the scenery or seeing the acting and having like facial expressions to experience from the actors that just breathes a little more humanity into the characters than what this kind of domestic suspense and thriller wants to do on page. So I could actually see myself watching the movie of this and actually maybe even enjoying a movie of this. I did guess what the twist was. I jumped ahead to confirm at the end that the twist was what I thought it was. Not a favorite twist of mine. Another part, I can't get into details, but it represents another thread of domestic suspense slash thriller that I just don't like. So all that being said, DNF, but a very constructive DNF, and totally makes sense at one. I get why this was popular for a long time, just not my thing, and more hopeful to read something else from this author. So I'm gonna call this one a win, actually. Well, very annoyingly, seems like I have lost my footage for Into the Water. I don't know what happened to it, but it's not in any of my memory cards, and here we are. So, editing Mara, hopping in to tell you what I thought about Into the Water. I literally am looking at my Goodreads reviews because I don't remember much of it. I remember not vibing with it, and I remember finding the ending distasteful, which bumped it down from like 2.5 to 3-ish stars to a 2-star for me. Let's see here. I was trying to vibe with this and was hanging on at a 2.5 to 3-star range for most of the book. Too many POVs for my taste. That's right. There's like so many POVs in this for reasons I can't totally discern, but it's a like missing girl kind of story-ish. Like there's this pond or this like pool. What is it called? Bottom of the river that runs through the town. Yeah. So there's like this pool that women have been dying in for centuries at this point in this small British village. And I do like thematically what this is trying to do about like women being disposable in some way. Like I think that was interesting, but there's a lot of sensitive things that are raised in this book that I think are handled pretty distastefully at the end. And that's fine. Like, I mean, well, how to say? I think that there's room for people to disagree if it's distasteful or not. So yeah, like I didn't like it. I didn't like the way it was handled. I found it off-putting. So there's sensitive topics raised. To me, it didn't really sit well, but your mileage is going to vary there. All in all, Paula Hawkins is just not a writer for me is my conclusion. And I ended up giving this 2 stars, which I stand by. It's also like not... Like, I think her writing is pretty nice, but I think her trope choices and sort of like her execution of her books personally really doesn't work for me. So she's just not a writer for me. This was not a book for me. And as I said, I had to look up my Goodreads review because I was struggling to remember anything about it. So it's also, to me, just not memorable. Goodbye, Paula Hawkins. Thanks for the memories. Don't call me. I'll call you. Okay, guys, I did it. I finished it. Okay, so I am going to talk about my feelings about Mr. Mercedes, both because I think I was like incoherent, but also because now that I have gotten through the full series, I think it would just be easier and safer for me to talk about them like together so that I don't accidentally reveal anything. Okay, so Mr. Mercedes, end of watch. These are the 2 in the Goodreads Choice Awards. Finders Keepers did not win because The Girl on the Train won that year. Ironically, my favorite part of the entire trilogy is in Finders Keepers, and it was what helped me crystallize the things that were not working for me in this series. So I will say, if we're talking about just like pure entertainment, they're not boring. They, held my attention. They have decently interesting things going on. Like, as a light, forgettable read, these, did a pretty good job. I have a few problems, though. The first and the thing that, like, truly bothers me in these is that Stephen King chose to have... So our main character is Bill Hodges. I should give you, like, some context about what this series is about. Bill Hodges is our main character. He's a recently retired detective, and his last case was this mass killing by this guy who drove a Mercedes through this crowd of people in line for a job fair during the 2008, during the Great Recession. There are all these people who are down on their luck, standing in line like they're waiting overnight for this job fair to open, and this dude comes through and kills a bunch of them and like hurts a lot of them. So that was his last case, and it kind of like stuck with him and like really messed him up. And then that person writes him a letter and it's like, pa ha ha, you didn't catch me. Things progress from there. So that's the first book. The next two books are still connected though to that first book in terms of everybody involved has some kind of connection to that original incident, that original mass killing. And we've got Bill Hodges as basically the main character for all of them. In the first book, he gets established to have basically two sidekicks, one of which is a black teen named Jerome, one of which is a neurodivergent woman named Holly. I think the treatment of those two characters is very deficient. And I'm just gonna leave it there because I feel like I'm not the right person to give a full assessment or review of that. I will just say, as somebody who does not have those identities, I found the handling of that very distracting and unnecessary, and it would have been better for him to just not include it. I will also give you warnings. All of these books deal a lot with self-harm and self-harm to completion. The N-word is a thing in these. There's just a lot of content warnings associated with this that are not handled well enough for there to be a world where I loved these books. Those things, I don't want to get into authorial intent because I don't think that Stephen King is I don't think it's his authorial attitude, but it is clumsily handled. Maybe that's the way to say it. A lot of these topics are just very clumsily handled in a way that was very distracting. So that diminished my enjoyment. The other thing is that Bill Hodges is the least interesting part of the story. He's our main character and he shouldn't be because I don't like him and he's not interesting. The reason the thing I normally like pretty well in a Stephen King is his characters. He has some very memorable characters. I haven't read a ton of his stuff. Most of what I've read are movies that I loved and I went back and read the book. But his character work is usually great. And I think Bill Hodges is the weakest main character I've ever encountered from him. Personally, just did not think he was a good person to choose as your lead. And the reason why I was saying Finders Keepers, the first half of it was my favorite part of any of these books, is because he's not in it. He doesn't show up until third-ish, halfway through the book. And there is a really compelling character in that first half, which is a little boy named Peter and a whole situation that he's getting himself into. So when I was reading that, it really crystallized for me of oh, that's what's missing from this is Peter. Okay, I'm into Peter, I'm into following him and, I'm enjoying spending time in his story. And I just did not feel that way about Bill at all. The other thing is I think this is Stephen King's attempt to write a hard-boiled detective kind of story, and I frankly think he just doesn't know how to do it. I'm just gonna be honest with you, I don't think he understands how this particular subgenre works. Doesn't mean that they're bad books or not entertaining. I just don't think that this is his strong suit. And I'm gonna say that eventually I think he finds his way back to his strong suit, and that is when I think plot-wise we're doing a lot better. So yeah, not bad, not good, fine. With moments of entertainment and moments of not enjoyment. I will say I think the weakest of these definitely is Mr. Mercedes. I'm gonna give this 2.5 stars. My favorite part of any of the books was in Finders Keepers, but I would give this 3 stars. And then End of Watch, I think as a whole is the most successful book, but I would still probably give it 3 stars, maybe verging on 3.5. Yeah, I will say that you know what? I'm gonna give this 3.5 because the villain in this is really good. There's a big bad in all of them, and I really like what happens with the big bad in this book. I think that was actually really interesting, and he was the other character I thought was genuinely interesting to read about. Yeah, the other thing I'll say is that both of these read more suspense than mystery thriller because it's much more cat and mouse, which is usually a suspense. The reader is not wondering who done it or what's going on. It's more you're waiting for the characters to catch up, and that's much more what these two are. Doesn't mean that it doesn't belong in this category, but I thought I'd throw that out there. Okay, well, I feel like I've been talking a long time, but considering I am covering 2 books and I read 3, I'm doing okay. So where would I put these in the rankings? This I would put over Into the Water, but under the guest list. This I don't even get to rank. And then this, I would probably put above the guest list, but below The Silent Patient and The Maid. So, whew. Finished this series, which was honestly kind of something that had been hanging over my head like a sword of Damocles for a couple of weeks. So I'm glad I'm done with these. I think next I'm gonna do some Dan Brown because I think that's just gonna be fun. So I think I'm gonna read Inferno next, and I'm not expecting it to be high quality, but I'm expecting to have a good time. Fingers crossed that that's what happens. I just finished up Inferno. I have mixed thoughts about it. So it was entertaining. I mean, it gave what I wanted it to give. If you've never read a Dan Brown, it felt ubiquitous there for a hot minute in the early aughts. Maybe if you're too young, oh man, I've reached that point in my life. Maybe if you're too young to have been around when it was a hot thing, you may not have encountered a Dan Brown. But the first time I read him, I was in Italy for the first time. This takes place a lot in Florence. I do think that is the optimal Dan Brown experience if you can, to wait until you are vacationing to Italy and read, I'm gonna say Angels and Demons. I think that's his best one. So yeah, anyway, it definitely, this took me back to a specific time in my life where I felt scandalous for reading Dan Brown because good Christian girls did not read his heretical, demonic books. But I did. Yeah, so anyway, I'm filibustering here because I'm avoiding actually having to talk about this. So this was entertaining, but not as entertaining as I was hoping it was gonna be because, how to say this, I don't wanna give too much away. I'll just say that in a post-pandemic world, we've all gained too much knowledge about the way some of like the World Health Organization stuff works to be fully swept away in this story, unfortunately. The misogyny is always there and it was going off. So I don't know. This felt like a not as good version of something like you know what? This is like if they'd made National Treasure 3. So National Treasure 2 was not quite as good as National Treasure 1, but was still like mostly satisfying. If they tried to make another one, it probably would have just like not felt nearly as satisfying, and that's kind of how this was. Fun fact, I was looking on Goodreads, it turns out I did read The Lost Symbol at some point. I don't remember it. So there you go. Anyway, not great, but also better than a lot of things I've read so far because at least it entertained me, which is really what I was looking for. So where would I put it in the rankings? I'm definitely gonna put it above Mr. Mercedes, Finders Keepers, Into the Water, and The Girl on the Train. Where would I put this vis-a-vis the guest list? Hard to say because I do think the guest list is probably a better book, and this one didn't like make me mad the way that the guest list in part did because I had such high hopes for the guest list, so that was an expectation issue. But you know what, it is a better book, and yeah, so I'll put it under the guest list. But yeah, so we're rounding the corner here, folks. I've got another Stephen King and I've got a random one that I had not really heard of before this. So yeah, I'll check back in once I've read one of those. I'm not sure which one I'm gonna go to next. Okay, I'm finishing up making some latte for myself, and I thought while I did that I could talk to you guys about The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave, which is the second to last book I've got to read for this godforsaken project. I'm kidding, mostly. I'm sorry if the machine is loud. This is just where we are in life. I'm getting ready to hit the road. So The Last Thing He Told Me is just the epitome of meh. Of fine. I think, so the setup is Hannah is our POV character. She gets this unexpected note from her husband who she's like deeply in love with. They've been married for a year and he was a widower. So he has a teenage daughter named Bailey who she struggled to connect with. But, you know, other than that, their life is great. And she gets this unexpected note, he's missing, and he just says, protect her. And then he gives like a longer note to Bailey saying like, listen to your stepmom. She loves you. I love you. Don't forget that. And so we're like, off to figure out what happened to him, what's going on. And a lot of this book is about the growing bond and relationship between Hannah and Bailey. And I thought that part was actually pretty successful. But I think I root caused, I think what the issue here is. It's a thriller setup that is then paced like a slow burn mystery. And I just don't think that those two things go together very well. When you get the answer, I didn't particularly like the answer and kind of like the ultimate decisions that the main character makes. Not that they were like bad decisions. I was just like, I don't know about this. So yeah, It's fine. I can see why somebody would like this, but I don't. It's not my trope combo. I think that what it promises, it doesn't really deliver. So I think for me that was disappointing because I think I just had the wrong I feel like the book itself gave me the wrong expectations about what kind of story I was about to get, and that was just like confusing and disappointing. So I'm gonna give it like, my enjoyment's at a 2, but I think it's a little bit better than that. I read the whole thing. It wasn't long. I'll give it like 2.5. I definitely liked it better than Into the Water. I was probably more entertained by Mr. Mercedes, but this was better done, so I don't know. I'll figure it out. When I post the rating, you'll see where I landed, but it's around Mr. Mercedes level. Speaking of Mr. Mercedes, I do have one more Stephen King, and it is a chunky one, but that is the last book, and then I'm done. So I'll meet you back for that. I'm finished, yay! I'm so glad. I feel like my enthusiasm for this project has significantly waned since I started it. I want to come back after I do, after like I edit all the footage, because I think it would be helpful for me to refresh myself on like what my initial intentions and mindset was on this project. But I have to say, now that I'm done, because I just finished The Outsider, I feel really bummed because my memory is that I had a lot more hope that I was gonna love books in this. Like, I knew that there was gonna be some that I probably wasn't gonna like, but I don't know. Really, at this point, my current impression is the only book I'm glad that I read was The Girl on the Train, which I DNF'd because I do feel like that was actually helpful in me understanding my own taste a little bit more. Let me put down my coffee. So, I say that because this was my last hope. I was really hoping that this was going to be one that I ended up liking, because I knew that it wasn't just like I knew it had like a paranormal element from the marketing. And I was like, okay, maybe when Stephen King is like back in his, ooky spooky deal, this will be better. And God, where to even start with this book? So I think the part of the problem is that the first half of the book is very different than the second half of the book in a way that I don't think was wholly successful. The first half of the book is about, also huge content warnings on this in terms of like the subject matter. It is dark, but it's basically a child is killed and assaulted in a very brutal way. So it's the investigation of that, and essentially like these two truths in tension. One is that the dude who is being accused of the crime, who's like a beloved member of the community, has an alibi. Like, he was in person at a Harlan Coben author event with fellow teachers. Like, he was in person somewhere with a bunch of people at the time the crime was committed, but also his fingerprints and DNA, and people saw him like in the crime scene. So like, how can those two things be true at the same time? He's arrested in a really public and like very humiliating way, and there's sort of like this vigilante justice aspect going on, but like, well, okay, we have his DNA, but like, what's going on? So like they arrested him because they feel like he did it, and they'll figure out these contradictions later. So that's like the first half of the book is kind of more a straightforward, how can these two things be true at once? And I have read and enjoyed thrillers like this, and I would say that was probably if it had actually had an interesting resolution, that probably would have been more successful. The other thing is this book sets up a lot of potentially very interesting questions about policing. And this did not come out like in the early aughts, like before all of the conversations we're now having about policing were happening. This came out in 2018. Like, that is well into the period where there's like an active national conversation here in the US about the role of policing, about like false confessions, about police overreach, about the fallibility of eyewitness. I mean, like, it's not like this is something that has not been known. And the places that this goes with the police, I think could have been very interesting, but it's not. Ultimately, it's not building to anything interesting. He just has a lot of like really unlikable police characters who it feels like the authorial attitude is that these police characters are likable, and they are not, at least in my experience. And there was nothing interesting done with that. The other other thing is that this fucking includes the Bill Hodges series. Oh my god, which I don't think is a spoiler. I think actually, in fact, you should read that series before you read this book because it spoils that entire series. So like that comes back in. Thank God the black teenager who was a big part of that series was not included because I honestly might have DNF'd it if he came back. I already struggled with Holly, who is the woman who is like neurodivergent. Like I already struggle with his characterization of her, but I just could not do another round of his horrible characterization of Jerome. So thank God he's not around really. So that's good at least. But if you liked Holly, I guess here's another book with her. I think that she's a really flawed character, not in her as like a person, but just like in her portrayal. I think it's not convincing and problematic, I guess is the word, but it's also just like unpleasant. It's an unpleasant character to read about, in my opinion, because of how poorly she's handled. So like, again, I go back to, was this entertaining? Yeah, this was entertaining, I guess. Like it went really quickly. I just think that if you think about any of this for more than a moment, it's got so much possibly underneath the surface about like people's natures, about human nature, and about specifically things around policing that could be a part of this and aren't. And for such a long book, I would say that it should be. I mean, like if this, okay, maybe here's the way to put this. If this had been much more a like plot-based page turner of a thriller, of like a paranormal thriller that's like 300 pages long, I actually think I probably could have liked this a lot more. But I think that because it's so long, it takes a long time to get where it's going. It's clearly meant to be something of a character study or a character-driven kind of book. I think it has aspirations to have conversation. And I just don't think it's successful in that at all. And it's so long that it's like, okay, yeah, like I've had things I've been less entertained by. That is true. Like it's not that I was bored in this. I just don't think for what it was trying to do, it was very successful. So for all of that being said, I would give this like a 2.5. I am so glad I never have to read about Bill Hodges ever again. And I would definitely be very curious to hear from people who are longtime Stephen King readers. This does not remind me of what I have read from Stephen King before and makes me think that like someone just needs to tell him to retire or someone needs to edit him better in his, you know, golden years. And I'm also just not even going to get into the fat phobia that has been like riddled throughout the Bill Hodges series and this. It's pervasive, but as a fat person, I'm just used to it. So like, it's not like it's there. If somebody was like, I hated this book because it was fat phobic, I'd be like, oh yeah, it is. But that's like not even the worst part of this book. I don't know. I would be curious to hear from people who are much bigger readers of him, or maybe it's because I'm reading the things of his that are more on the thriller mystery end, as opposed to some of his more recent horror. Maybe his horror is still more successful. I don't know, but this is definitely making me not want to ever read another Stephen King book post 2010. Oh, I should also mention his portrayal of anybody under the age of 50 is awful. Like, I don't think he understands. I don't know, guys. Like, I think part of this is maybe the most disappointing one, because this was the one where I was like, it's a standalone Stephen King. I have liked those in the past. Maybe this is going to be it. And it wasn't. I did not like this, and I found this really disappointing. So yeah, this might be the most, I don't know. Okay, anyway, let me edit the rest of the footage. I will edit all of the video so that I can see what the journey was as opposed to my memory of it. And then I will come back and we'll do a final wrap up. We'll talk about my final rankings. Like I might adjust them a little bit. I don't know. And yeah, okay. I'll see you once I've finished doing some editing. Okay. So we've come to the end, friends, and I've been doing some reflecting. I've done some editing on this vlog, and I confirmed my recollection, which is that I had some trepidation for sure about some of these titles, but I was mostly excited to give a lot of them a try. And I feel like that was beaten out of me slowly over the course of this video, because it's very disheartening to read so many meh books. I don't consider a 3.5 or even a 3, frankly, to be a bad rating for a book. 3 means it met my expectations, it was fine. But I think considering that these are supposed to be winners, the fact that so many of them were just fine was pretty disappointing to me. And I'm gonna say that I think the biggest, how to say this? I'm gonna say the biggest success from this vlog was the DNF, which was The Girl on the Train, because I don't feel like it's an objectively bad book in any way. I think if it were more my thing, it actually probably would have been my favorite book from this. It's just not for me, but I feel like reading it now or attempting to read it now versus my original DNF, I actually learned something about my reading taste and had like better language to describe some of it. So I actually feel like that was the biggest success of this project, even though I DNF'd it. I would say definitely my biggest disappointment is my Stephen King flop era journey. So I did a little bit of research on this because I was like, I don't know how I feel about where I'm at with old Mr. King these days, because I have read and enjoyed books from him in the past. I would say my favorite book, like full-length novel from him that I have finished is 11/22/63. I read that right when it was first coming out, and I thought that that was genuinely really good. And then when I was younger, I read several of the books that were turned into the best-known adaptations of his work. So like, I remember reading Carrie and liking that pretty well. I really liked Misery. I was so on The Shining because I saw the movie first. I wonder how I'd feel about that now, actually. But anyway, and then I've also quite enjoyed a lot of his like novella collections. I got into those because of like The Shawshank Redemption and whatever that Johnny Depp writer one was. I've read a couple of those and enjoyed those. So it's not that I'm incapable of enjoying a Stephen King novel. I just think that these were like really bad relative to what I know he can produce. I should also say that his memoir about writing is one of my favorite memoirs ever. I love what he has to say about writing. I do feel like he was historically like very poo-pooed and marginalized for what is his talent, which is writing genuinely very compelling setups. And historically, at least, I've always really liked his character work. I felt like that was kind of his strength more than anything else. Kind of similarly to what Nora Roberts does in romantic suspense and contemporary romance. I've always thought of him as somebody who writes characters in a way that you just get really swept up in their life and in their mental process. And it's a real talent to be able to do that in commercial fiction. So I by no means think of him as like an untalented hack or something. I just wonder if he needs to hang up his typewriter, whatever, like stop writing, or go through a much more rigorous editing process, because I think all of the books I read were aggressively fine and very disappointing for what I know he is capable of writing. I do want to mention that I wanted to see if it was just I haven't read enough of his work or like what Stephen King fans think of these books, and I found 2 people who I enjoy their reviews who I know love Stephen King and I've read a lot of him, Dane and Emily. I will link their videos below, and their reviews of The Outsider were very similar to my thoughts. Like I think Dane was a little more generous than Emily was to the book, but it wasn't, I appreciated the validation that I'm like, it's not just me, right? Like, because that was a very well-received book at the time. Like, some people had problems specifically with the ending, but the things that I kind of remember hearing about that book were not what my main problems with it were. Like, yes, the ending was weak, but that's kind of just a Stephen King thing, and that didn't, the ending I was pretty okay with. But that one in particular I found very disappointing because I don't know. I was thinking that might be one that I'd had on my radar a little bit, and I kind of thought about reading it, and this pushed me to do it, and it was just okay. I will also say that I really enjoyed, I found a video from Princess Weeks talking about the issues that I was raising in the Bill Hodges series. There's a lot of, anyway, she's specifically talking about Stephen King's use of the magical Negro trope across his oeuvre, and I definitely feel like she put into words, like I hadn't quite narrowed on like, what is it about this that I'm not liking in the way he's portraying Jerome in the Bill Hodges series, and that's really what it is. I definitely recommend that video, especially because she is a very big Stephen King fan, so it's not like she's coming from a place of like, I hate his stuff. She's basically coming from a place of like, here's what I don't like about this author, otherwise Morris writes books I really enjoy. So anyway, I guess this, like, my main takeaway or my main abiding memory from this vlog is not going to be like Into the Water or Inferno or The Last Thing He Told. Like, those are just gonna, I'm just gonna forget them. My main impression is gonna be, I think I accidentally was forced to read a lot of Stephen King in his flop era. And this makes me curious to go back and read some of the classic Stephen King that I haven't gotten to. I was gonna read it, but I'm not going to. It's so long and I know some of the things in it that I just don't want to read. So, but I'm thinking like Pet Sematary. I've never read that. I've never read Salem's Lot. I don't think I've read The Stand. Like, there's some of those that I'm like, maybe I should go back and try those when I don't think he was in his flop era and when he was writing in a time where I probably am not going to be as like about some of his portrayals of marginalized identities, because like I'm not expecting a commercial fiction book in the 70s to be that great at that. You know what I mean? So anyway, I am also gonna I'm not gonna read any more books that he has published post 2011, because I think that's when 11/22/63 came out. So I am unhauling these two because I'm like, no. Not gonna risk it. So that's really my main takeaway from this project. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm not gonna say that I enjoyed doing this project, but I'm glad that I have done it. And I will say, because I did this, I think I'm now at the end of the year gonna have to do the like reading all the nominees for the Goodreads Choice Awards in mystery thriller, because I feel like that's a good bookend to the year since I started the year doing this. And that was originally a Books and Lala / Kayla idea, but Meg did it last year, so I feel like she's broken the seal on me copying that idea. So I'll do that at the end of the year, just to kind of bookend this Goodreads Choice Award winners experience, because oh golly gee, has it been an experience. So that being said, I do really want to thank Izzy for coming up with this idea. I think it was a great one. I am really excited to watch everyone's videos because I've been enjoying everybody's suffering in our group chat together. So please check out that playlist. Please go check out everyone who is participating, because there are a lot of categories, so there's a lot of videos that should be going up today. I thank them for including me, because this was definitely interesting experience and definitely one that built some communal bonds as we all suffered together. So definitely let me know what you thought about any of the books that I talked about. Let me know if I would love people who have read a lot of Stephen King and like him to give me some feedback of if I'm on the right track with my hypothesis that he's in his flop era. So let me know any of that in the comments below. Check out all of the other videos from the other creators. And I think that will do it for this video. So if you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below, and I think that that will do it. I hope you're having an absolutely lovely day today, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!